Hello viewers, welcome back to our YouTube channel. Today is 15th June 2026. We want to continue with our series of quantitative techniques, and in the previous video I spoke about things to do with the application uses and then the limitations of statistics, and we had promised that we are going to kickstart from the branches of statistics, or what we call the different types of statistics. Now, before we look at the branches of statistics, you need to understand that in statistics we use two processes. The first process is the process of describing data. We describe the set of data set. So when we are describing the data set, when describing the data set or describing the set of data, we mainly try to find the different attributes or the characteristics of a given set of data set. And remember, we said in statistics we don't always study the entire population. We always pick out the samples from within the population, and then we do a generalization and we make conclusions about the entire population when we have studied those different samples that we have collected using different sampling methods. So when we are describing data, we try to look at the different attributes of the different variables within a given set of data. So that's one process that we use. The other process is what we call the description, drawing conclusions about the data set based on sampling. Now, drawing conclusions, of course, here we try to look at, we make estimates, we draw conclusions, or we make decisions, we make predictions about the set of data based on the sampling method that we have used. So these two processes, they are the ones that give birth to what we call the branches of statistics. So if you are to understand the branches of statistics, you have to understand the two processes that we use, because it is these two processes that give birth to the branches of statistics, and they are only two, meaning one of them has to do with description of data and the other has to do with making conclusions about a given set of data based on a sample that we have collected from the population. Now, let's look at the first branch of statistics. The first branch of statistics is what we call the descriptive statistics. Descriptive statistics. Of course, when you look at the descriptive statistics, it comes, if you just look at the word descriptive, it comes from describe or description. So when we are looking at the definitions of different key terms in statistics, we make sure that we provide the definition and we also give the relevant examples so that we can be able to understand what these are all about. So descriptive statistics is the branch of statistics which deals with methods. It deals with the methods of collection of data, its presentation, and organization in various forms, and the forms in which we can organize or present our data, we can organize it in what we call the distribution tables. We can use graphs, we can use diagrams, we can use even the computations, the numerical computations. So this branch of statistics deals with how the data is collected. It deals with the methods of collecting the data, how the data is presented and organized in various forms, and also it looks at finding the measure of central tendency and measure of dispersion or spread, which are used in description of data. So the main key thing here is the description of data. Description of data. So the descriptive statistics focuses on the numerical procedures and then the graphical procedures. Among the numerical procedures, we have issues to do with finding the measure of central tendency and also finding the measures of dispersion or spread. And within the graphical procedures, we look at presentation of data into what we call OGIVs, histograms. We also look at pie charts, diagrams, frequency distribution tables, and others. So all these aspects, the graphical and the numerical procedures, they are used to summarize and process the data into a meaningful information, or that we can be able to use to understand the given set of data. So descriptive statistics looks at those key different items. Now, someone is going to be wondering, how can I be able to make a conclusion based on the descriptive statistics? Of course, we look at different people, maybe within the organization, like the managers, maybe the CEOs. They make use of the descriptive statistics in presentation of what we call their annual reports. They could be financial reports, they are preparing financial accounts, they are preparing maybe bank statements and other kind of aspects. So when managers and CEOs are presenting this information, they always come up with statements, and these statements are prepared maybe using graphs, whereby they can display maybe a graph showing how the sales have improved in a given period, maybe in a given quarter. So that they can be able to explain that since the sales are growing for the different quarters within the year, then we are expecting that maybe our business is performing well. So they always use these descriptive features like graphs, like doing computations. Of course, you can compute the mean profit that you have earned maybe for a given period of time. You do some comparison that last year we earned this amount on average, and this year we have made this, and you can be able to forecast in the future to tell how much profit you can earn based on the information for the profit that you have earned in the previous years. So when managers and decision makers, like the CEOs, they are presenting their reports, they always indicate these graphs, they always indicate the tables to illustrate or to describe a given set of data. It could be income, it could be assets of the business, it could be future projections of maybe sales, cash, and other kind of aspects that are going to be presented in either tables or using graphs or using any other computations. So that's how we find that descriptive statistics helps in presentation of data in an understandable way, so that we can have a meaningful description of how this data looks like. So the other definition that we can use, of course, this is the main definition where you look at the different aspects that are going to be done within the computations and trying to describe the data. So you can say that this descriptive statistics refers to the collection, organization, summarization, and interpretation or interpretation and presentation of data. You see, it all looks at how data is going to be organized and presented in various forms, maybe using graphs like ogive, Lorenz curves, maybe box and Wix plots, and other items. Could be diagrams in forms of pie charts. It could be into measurements where we are computing the measures of central tendency, the mean, median, mode, or it could be the measures of dispersion where we compute the variance and then the standard deviations. So those are some of the things that are entailed within the descriptive statistics. Now, let's look at the other category of statistics, because as I said, there are two types of statistics or branches of statistics, and we said one of the branch is the descriptive statistics, which deals on how data can be described into a meaningful and an understandable way to the different stakeholders or different users. Now, when you look at the inferential statistics, it's called inferential statistics. You can call it inferential statistics, or what we call the predictive statistics. So you can also see it comes from the word prediction, predictive statistics. So we are going to make conclusions based on a given sample that we have collected. As I told you, we always analyze data through sample, especially when the data is so big. We can't be able to analyze the entire population. Like for instance, we can't analyze all the people in Uganda. Maybe we can select different people from different regions, and then we form a given group, and those groups, what we call the stratas or homogeneous components that will be making up a given sample, depending on the given factors that we are using to select those individuals. So inferential statistics, this is the branch of statistics which deals with techniques used for analysis of data. It's the branch of statistics which deals with techniques used for analysis of data, making estimates, and making estimates that lead to predictions and drawing conclusions or inferences from limited information taken on a sample basis and testing the reliability of the estimates or predictions. So we don't just make conclusions, but we also look at are the conclusions that we have made reliable based on the information that we have. So the inferential statistics is used to make comparisons or to make predictions about a larger group. And these larger group are the ones that we call the population. So using the information that we have generated or that we have gathered about a small part of that population that we call a sample. We use a sample, we understand the different attributes of that sample, then we go ahead to draw a conclusion about the entire population. Because remember, this sample is going to be picked from the population, so a sample is going to be a representative of the entire population. So once you study the sample, you can make a generalization of how the population looks like based on the attributes of the sample. So statistical inference, or from maybe the word inference itself. The word inference refers to reaching a conclusion, refers to reaching a conclusion. Reaching a conclusion based on available information, based on available information or knowledge, based on available knowledge or facts. You look at the facts of a given sample. So this information that we are talking about, this information, we got it from the sample. These are the attributes that we have gotten from the sample, of which the sample we picked from the population. So we look at the facts that we have gotten from the sample, then we make a generalization. We make a conclusion about the entire population. That maybe if we have looked at, maybe if we examine the people who are staying in slum areas, and maybe we found most of them, they are drug addicted. So you can make a conclusion about the entire people who are living in slum areas, that they are drug addicts. So once you have made the conclusion that maybe these people are actually drug addicts, you don't just stop there. Statistical inference goes ahead to make sure that they do what we call the hypothesis testing. They test to confirm the reliability of the fact that these people are drug addicts. They confirm beyond reasonable doubt by doing what we call the hypothesis testing, whereby if the information is more reliable, then they can accept the fact that these people are actually drug addicts. If they find there is no sufficient evidence that they can confirm, then they go ahead to reject the fact that these people are drug addicts. So it's all about making predictions and at the same time confirming the fact that those predictions that you have got are actually true. So the inference is all about reaching a conclusion based on the available facts. And we have said these available facts, we get them from the sample that we collected from the population. So those facts, they are the ones we are going to base on to make sure that we draw a conclusion that the entire population is maybe in this and this form. So statistical inference. Statistical inference looks at the methods that are used to analyze this sample or the subset of data for purposes of making conclusions about the entire data set. So whenever we are looking at statistical inference, just know we are going to be focusing on the methods that we can use to analyze the sample data. Then once we have analyzed the data of the sample, we can make a generalization about the entire population. Now, statistical inference, its main objective is just to make a generalization. It's just an act of generalizing a sample to a population with a certain calculated degree of certainty. That's why when you make a conclusion that these people are actually drug addicts, you have to find reasons that satisfy the fact that these people are actually drug addicts. Like for instance, maybe if you look at the case for Okelo Onyom, if you are saying that this person, if you make a claim on maybe the person is guilty of the offense that he or she has been accused of, you don't just stop there from making the allegations. That's why he was brought to court, and then they found the the facts behind what had actually happened. So you go ahead to provide beyond reasonable doubt or with some degree of certainty that indeed this person is guilty of the crime. So where you are going to take an extra step to find the certainty of the conclusion that you have got, that's what we call hypothesis or hypothesis testing. But from the time you make the conclusion that this person maybe is guilty, then that is inference, or that is just making a conclusion or a prediction or an estimate of what the truth might look like. Then when you go ahead to prove it, of course you prove it with the facts within the data that you have collected. Then it becomes a generalization. You can go ahead to generalize the sample, that based on the sample that I have collected, such and such things exist, depending on the facts within the data that you have collected. So the main aim of statistical inference is to make certain determinations with regards to the unknown constants. And these unknown constants, we try to look at the population, because we are trying to study the population, but given the fact that we can't study the entire population at once, we pick out a sample, we study the sample, then we make a generalization about the population to confirm. So those are the two different aspects. So we've said that statistical inference is the branch of statistics that focuses on using the data to make predictions or to make forecasts or estimates for more decisions. So it involves generalizations beyond the given data set. So it is something that descriptive statistics can't do. So when you are looking at statistical, we shall look at the different items that are within these different branches of statistics. But one thing we can pick maybe from the inferential statistics is that it is the inferential statistics is divided into what we call estimation, where we estimate or we make predictions, and then we also have what we call the hypothesis testing. Hypothesis testing. We shall look at each of these items. Of course, you find that the hypothesis, the estimates, of course, we can use information based on, this is just more of estimating the population parameters using the sample. We can use a point estimate, or what we call the confidential intervals, or the interval estimate. So these are the two different things. Of course, the estimation is just the process by which one makes inference about a given population based on the information obtained from the sample. So these are some of the things that we shall look at as we go into deeper analysis. Of course, for statistical hypothesis testing, that one it's all about making a claim. you make a claim about the population characteristic or the sample. Of course, this one, most of the times this estimation deals with the sample, but when we go to the hypothesis, we make a claim. So for the hypothesis testing, it's just a formal procedure for investigating our idea about the world using statistics. So we make a claim about the entire population, then we go ahead to prove it. So when you're testing some of the predictions or the estimates that you have made, the claims that you have made, what you do is hypothesis testing. We do what we call hypothesis testing. So those are the things that we shall look at as far as the computations are concerned. We shall do hypothesis testing deep into details. We get the null hypothesis, the alternative hypothesis, and then we'll be able to understand. We shall be able to understand what's the difference between estimate, what's the difference between an hypothesis. So let's meet in the next video as we look at the different aspects. But for now, we have completed the chapter 1. The chapter 2, we said from our introduction that this chapter 2 is all about the statistical data. So we shall look at the statistical data. This is where we are going to define most of the things. This is where we are going to get the information. We define what data is. We define the different data. We define what primary data, secondary data. We give examples of each. We give the advantages. We give the disadvantages of each. We look at qualitative and the quantitative data. We look at source of primary data. We also list the advantages of the different sources that can provide to us the primary data. We also explain the sources of secondary data. We list their advantages and disadvantages, and that will be that will be included in the chapter 2 of statistical data. So we'll meet in the next video as we are talking about chapter 2, statistical data.